Hello everyone. Welcome to this webinar presentation by ESS BIZTOOLS and our affiliates, COVID-19 Survival Panel. This is the 7th weekly session that we've presented. I'm Peter Towers, Managing Director of ESS BIZTOOLS. Today we're going to look at impact and mindset, which is going to be presented for you by Jordan Lowry, Managing Director of Blackstone Business Services. And Jordan's going to share with you some of his observations on experiences and the changes that have occurred through the last 2 to 3 months of COVID-19. And our second presenter today is Andrew Ward, who's going to talk to you about the opportunity that crowdsource funding equity raising presents for small, medium enterprises, particularly when banks might be not as interested in dealing with clients post 30 September 2020. So how are you today, Jordan? Welcome.
I'm superb. Thank you, Peter. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thanks, Jordan. And welcome, Andrew, to our webinar series. This is your first time with us, so I hope you enjoy the experience with us today.
Thanks, Peter. I'm looking forward to it.
Okay, thank you very much. And gentlemen, we will move on if we can. Impact and mindset to be presented by Jordan Lowry, Managing Director of Blackstone Business Services. I'm switching over to you now, Jordan, so you're on your way. Thanks, mate.
Good man. Thank you very much for having me, Peter, and welcome, Andrew, and to all of our listeners and those tuning in today. It's my pleasure to be here. We've got some training happening in the office today, so I've stepped out into the trusty mobile office. They serve to be a good studio. So to lead into that, thank you for the introduction, Peter. This is COVID-19 has been. It's had its challenges, but I think in every obstacle there's opportunity. And what COVID has really given us and given business owners and probably a number of your clients as well is the opportunity to self-reflect and meditate on the things that we were doing really, really well and the things that we might not have been doing so well, or the things that we wanted to improve on, and then utilizing that opportunity to maybe achieve our goals. And that's what I want to touch on today. It's really focused on the business owners and the managers. We've focused a lot on employees and being good leaders and the support network that we can put in place for them. But sometimes as a business owner, it's lonely at the top. I remember when I purchased out my business partners out and I took over the sole management of my company. I'll be honest and raw here. It was hard because sometimes you've got no one to talk to. I know that I had my wife, but you know what? She's out there. She's managing her own company. She's managing her training. She's got her own staff and those things within her company that she works for. So I think as a man, you keep it inside and you're like, you know what? I'm not going to burden her with that. So a lot of times we're left with our own thoughts. And we don't have that accountability partner, or we don't think of who we can actually leverage off to actually get that help for ourselves. So before we go into goals and the way we view goals today, there's two things I wanted to talk about. And that's number one, taking time for yourself or sharpening your own axe and utilizing your support network. But taking time for yourself is really, really important. As a business owner, it's easy to burn out. And I know I do. I'm guilty of that sometimes too, is we always want to be really, really responsive. Like someone calls you or they send you an email and you're like, you know what, I set this benchmark and I've got to respond straight away. But a lot of very successful people I know, and one thing that I've utilized myself is actually taking that time and saying, you know what, this morning I'm actually going to allocate the time to focus on this. And I'm actually not going to check any emails until the window of say 12 and 2 o'clock. And that's when I'll respond to those emails and to the phone calls. Some business owners actually do that every day. You'll get an automated reply from them. And it says, you know what, I'll be checking my emails today in this window and I'll be making my callbacks then. So whatever works for you, a bit of trial and error there. But the analogy I will give you today is of two axemen. And this was something that really actually made me reflect. on what I did and how often I sharpened my axe or spent time for myself. And imagine two axemen, and they're both looking at a field of 100 trees. It's 10 rows of 10 trees, and both axemen go into it with two different approaches, vastly different. So the first axeman, he gets in there, and his job is tree down, 1 tree, 2 trees, 3 trees, and he just knocks these trees down. He's just doing it with that axe, and he's swinging away. All of a sudden, he's 4th trees in, and he looks over at the second guy, and the second guy's approach was actually this, or the second axeman was, he takes down that first tree, and then he would sit on his stump, and he'd pull out his sharpening tool, and he would sharpen that blade. And then he goes into the next tree. All of a sudden, the first guy's 12 trees in, and he looks over, and the other guy's 4 trees, and he says, I have got this in the bag as far as a race to knock these over. But by tree 15, 16, he realizes each swing that he takes is going less and less deep into the tree. And then by the time he realizes he's actually got to take the time and sharpen his blade, he gets to the stage where the sharpening takes a long time. And he realizes, I won't be able to sharpen this blade too many times, and I'll have no blade left. Or it'll be so blunt, it'll be past the point of repair. And all of a sudden, that first guy who just sat on the stump and he sharpened it every time quickly overtakes him. And the same is true with our energy reserves as a business owner or a manager. So, or even for our clients, unless you take the time to sharpen your blade, whatever that may be for you, as whether it be for your personality, take the time. And no one's going to hold you. You will be more efficient for it. You think about the way a turbo works in a car. It doesn't work at 7,000 RPM. It has a sweet spot in that sort of mid to higher mid range. So think of it that way. Get to your efficiency point and utilize it that way. Also, this too, you heard me mention before that it can be lonely at the top. So a support network is really important. And that's about actually thinking of the people that you work closely with. Drop them a phone call, have a chat with them. I love analogies, and I love to tell by story. So I want to share with you a lesson from nature, and it's of these amazing trees. They're called the redwoods. So the American redwoods, big trees. They're very tall, very skinny trees. Well, they're quite a thick tree, but they're very lean or narrow when you look at them, because they grow to 120 meters tall. It's a big tree. And what happens is when the hurricanes come through in America, they can destroy towns. They uproot much stronger trees with these huge root systems, and these redwoods stay standing. And you look at them and you're like, these things should just attract the wind and rip straight out of the ground. So it makes us wonder, like, they must have a really, really deep root system. The funny thing is, though, the American redwoods, we're talking 12 telephone poles tall. If you go off an Australian telephone size, they actually have a really small root system, sometimes 3 to 6 feet deep. It's under 2 meters deep on a 120 tall meter tree. And their strength actually comes from, they send out their root system, and they send it out and they jet it out there, and it actually interlocks with the roots of neighboring trees. And that's where their strength comes from. It's really, really interesting. So I think about that as business, and I think about that as how we as a business can weather storms like COVID-19. How do we do that? It is relying on the support network we've got around us. And you know what? You can't rely on them to shoot their roots out to you. Sometimes you've got to be the one that takes the initiative and shoot your roots out to them. So I would encourage you, if you're struggling at this time, reach out to someone. And based on reciprocity, do you know what? You start to do things for people and reach out, things will really change, really happen. So I really hope that helps. So I want to now move on to goal setting, because sometimes as we do this on our own, how do we motivate ourselves? We do that by goals. And one of the biggest things about goals is or the biggest hurdles is we either don't hit them, or we think, you know what, maybe I've set a goal that's too hard, or I'm having trouble achieving it. So a lot of times this can be a mental or a mindset barrier. And it makes me think of this guy. I don't know whether you've heard of him. He was called Roger Bannister. So he was a semi-long distance runner, and it was in 1954. And back then, they used to run the mile. So they run the distance of a mile, and it was always over 4 minutes. And he's this guy who started to say, I think we can run the mile in under 4 minutes. So, and people at the time, we're talking medical professionals, physiologists, were like, it is physically impossible to get under 4 minutes to run the mile. He's like, I think we can do it. He tried a few times and he ended up getting it. And this was the funny thing. He ran. It was barely seconds underneath the 4 minute mark to run the mile. And so this is a record that had stood for thousands of years. And I'm just want to share this with you too. That record then lasted 46 days before it was broken again. Okay. And since that day, over 4,500 people have run the mile in under 4 minutes. Current record set in 1999, if it hasn't been toppled since this article, and it's set 3 minutes 43. So it's funny how once that mental hurdle has been removed, that things can be achieved. So it makes us wonder, like, are we challenging our beliefs or are we challenging our habits? Because someone asked me this, they said, Jordan, I've got these amazing, and they only did it recently. They said, I've got these huge ambitions, like world-changing ambitions. However, my actions don't match them. Should I actually lower my ambitions or up my actions? And it's a really, really good question. And I said to that person, and I regurgitate information from someone that I'd heard say this exact same thing in the past. So I'm going to share it with you today. If you are not achieving your goals, you don't want them enough. You don't care for them enough. That sounds really, really harsh. And when the first time I heard that, I thought the same thing. I was like, how do you know? But the thing is if you truly are not achieving your goals or your actions are not matching that, they don't mean enough to you. And I'll share this example with you. And I've shared this with a few people as well. If I was to say, if you've got 12 months from this day to make $1 million, what are the chances that you will make that if you do it legally in the next 12 months to make $1 million, no matter who you are? I'll get different answers. 0%, 1%, 3%, 2%, 1%, 3% again, 0% again. And then so the goal is there. I actually then change that up and say, okay, now if I was to put it this way, if you don't make $1 million in the next 12 months legally, everyone that you know, love, and care about will be killed or they'll die. What's the chances that you'll make that $1 million now? And everyone's like, oh, 100%. It's a definite thing. And that's the thing. The goal didn't change. The time period didn't change. But your motivation or your care factor about that goal did. And the same is true with goals today. Like whether you say, do you know what, I want to set a goal for, it may be a financial goal that you want to achieve in business or a certain time frame you want to get something done. How do you make that goal mean more to you? And I think this is really important because financial is not usually enough. So usually we get a sense of satisfaction when we are able to bring enrichment or joy to someone else's life, or we're able to help people and we physically see that smile on their face. So you may say, okay, if in my business, if I can make an extra $200,000 profit this year, I'm going to donate $5,000 to my kids' sport club, or I'm actually going to buy my child their first car, or whatever it may be. Set a goal and align it with something that actually means more to you. And you may see some really, really big changes there. So they're just some things that I wanted to share with you today. Because a big thing about when it comes to goals is we think of motivation and drive. And I think it's easy to confuse the two and think they're the same thing, but they're vastly different. So to achieve those goals and to keep you on focus, you actually have to be driven. And the difference between the two is this. Motivation, I think, gets you started. Motivation, we all do that. You start that diet and you say, I'm going to go to the gym. This is usually New Year, right? We're all motivated. You go to the gym. My body's terrible. It's one of those, I think every year I start the gym, and I think I had 3 memberships at one time. I still might actually, if COVID's still taking the payments out. And I say to people, this is not a 3 gym membership body, but we're going back off that old principle. It's like, I'm happy enough as it is. Obviously I don't want to change it enough. So my wife probably would be happier if I did, but let's going to that though. Like, motivation gets us started. Motivation signs you up at the gym. And you know what, the first time you go every day in the week. The second week, you mean maybe once, twice. I'm a bit sore this week. By the third week, sitting on the couch eating Twinkies or Fantails, whatever it may be. The thing is drive is what keeps you focused. It keeps you going. And I think about this, like we always know that one person starts a fad here, there, and everywhere. But actually, the people that you've met in life who you are truly driven, they're the people you look at and I know I've met these people, and I try and be one of them, but I know that I actually have to work to do it. But I've met people, and you look at them and you're like, do you know what? No matter what they put their efforts to in life, they will succeed because they're tenacious and they're driven. Some people have it naturally. It's very, very rare to do that, but we can mirror those characteristics, and we can, with talking about challenging actions and challenging habits, we can actually achieve that. So I think that's really, really important. So guys, if you can do that, remember, be driven, stay motivated, but the drive will keep you anchored there. Rely on your support networks and those around you, and make time for yourself, and you will achieve your goals. And I'm excited to speak with you all, hopefully at a later date. So Peter, thank you for the opportunity, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Jordan. And I found that a very, very interesting presentation. Very well done. Thank you. Could I just ask you a question, and maybe Andrew might have a question? And Priscilla Smith has said amazing motivational speech. So well
Thank you,
done,
Priscilla.
Jordan. Jordan, in your experience of working with business owners who have copped a lot of problems through this coronavirus, especially in those first few weeks, were enough of them implementing the strategies you've just talked about, or can they now start that process to get their minds and bodies fit to meet the challenges? Because what Andrew is going to talk about shortly is there's still a lot of challenges. Unfortunately, I don't think we're even at half time in this game. And the second half is going to be pretty rugged for a lot of businesses. You got any comments that how they might prepare themselves for that?
Peter, yeah, I think the old saying, there is no time like the present to start. Okay, like if we should have started yesterday, today's the perfect time. Corona has been a leveler for a lot of people, and I look at different aspects of our business that we looked at too. And this is whether it be a piece about showing vulnerability. Like, there were aspects in our business where I was funding ego, and like, you know, you have a big office here and a big office there, and it's as well as it being negative, and potentially the ramifications of this are going to continue. Even if everything was to go back perfect from now, it's going to be a tough 6, 12 months, 18 months ahead. But I think you take, like you heard me say before, every obstacle, there's an opportunity. Take from it the good, and look at that, and take action now though. So do that. I think an honest self-reflection and self-analysis of yourself, your business is imperative. And do you know what? If you got to cut a bit of fat from the business, or step away from something that may have, let's use that term, you were funding your ego. Okay, no one's going to question it in this time. But there is no time like the present to make that happen. Streamline your operation, and that's what will hopefully allow you to keep driven and keep focused and get through whatever tough times may be ahead. But if you're if you're sinking on if you're on a ship, and it's I hate the term sinking, but if you had to if we had to abandon weight, the things you get rid of are the things you don't need in the first instance. So have a look at your business and say, do we really need that, whatever it is? And the leaner you are, the more efficient you'll be in the months ahead. So I hope that answers that question, Peter.
Yes, thank you very much, Jordan. I was amiss at the beginning. I should have made clear about questions. If any of our viewers on this live webinar do have questions, please go into chat and type your question in, and I will put the questions to Jordan and Andrew later on when Andrew's speaking. Or if you're watching us on the live feed on Facebook, welcome, and I hope you're enjoying the viewing. You've heard a very good presentation then from Andrew. Unfortunately, you can't send us questions to ask the presenters on a live broadcast the way we're doing this, but you can send the questions to me, peter@essbiztools.com.au, and I will forward them on to Jordan or Andrew and get their responses, and we'll send them back to you. Plus, we will list the questions and the answers on the ESS BizTools website, so other people will be able to go to them. So Jordan, thank you very much. And we'll now move on to introduce you to our next speaker. Thank you. Our next speaker today is Andrew Ward. Andrew, for I think about 8 years, has been an independent director of Crowdfunding Institute of Australia. Andrew has been one of the key people involved in this whole concept of introducing crowdsourced funding to Australia. In some respects, Australia is playing catch up because a number of the other Western countries, including New Zealand, have had crowdsourced funding for a lot longer than what we've had in Australia. So it's my privilege now to introduce you to Andrew Ward, who's joining us from Sydney. Hi, Andrew, how are you?
Peter, I'm well. Sorry, my
That's all right.
Zoom just had a little hiccup then.
Oh, yes, we've all been tested with Zoom and these sorts of things, but you're there now, so welcome, and please tell us your presentation.
Thank you for the kind introduction, and thank you, Jordan, for your words before. Jordan, I wanted to share with you an observation, if I can. It's really quickly. But, you know, there are a lot of businesses going through pain, and it's important to realize that your competitors are doing that too. And that focus that you're talking about is really important. If you can become the leanest cat in the jungle, you can survive. And I think one of those motivations is, and you put your finger on it, is sometimes you need to go hard, but sometimes also if you need to go lean and into survival mode before your competitors, and then they'll outspend themselves and you'll be in the jungle left with all the clients. And I think that's really just the only comment that I would have. But I think that you're right. You've got to be active, even if that is actively reducing costs and going into survival mode and making it work in the long term. So thank you, Peter. I'm not here to talk about that, so I'll move to my presentation. So yeah, as Peter mentioned, I've been involved with equity crowdfunding for a fair while now. Before I commence, I should tell you, I am not an accountant. I'm not a lawyer. I don't have a platform that you can raise equity crowdfunding. In fact, you know, my position within crowdfunding has been sort of the Switzerland between all of the industry, between the people who are wanting to do crowdfunding raises, between the licensed intermediaries who facilitate those raises through the government who regulates that industry, and you know, and the crowd generically. So my interest in this is crowdfunding and sort of co-ownership is consistent with my sorts of interests in business. So, you know, in my day-to-day business ethical fields, the consulting, we tend to work around employee ownership, member ownership, such as co-ops and mutuals. And so crowdfunding, which enables stakeholders to have an actual stake, has been an interest of mine for ages. Crowdfunding itself, so yeah, as Peter mentioned, we're not the newest kids on the block. In fact, in 2012, Obama instigated the Jobs Act in the US, which created, I guess, the first Western legislation around equity crowdfunding. Similar legislation was put in place in the UK and in various parts of Europe. In 2014, the Corporate and Market Advisory Commission, CAMAT, did a review and asked for industry input on how to construct our laws for equity crowdfunding. And that's when I started a group with people like Possible and the Australian Small Scale Offer Board to put in like applications independently, but that all had some harmony to them we all knew where we agreed and disagreed about some points so that the industry could sing with a singular voice. Unfortunately, the political instability that followed from 2014 meant CAMAC was cut. We had, I think, Rudd, Gillard, Rudd, Abbott, Turnbull, Abbott, and we didn't actually get licensed intermediaries and equity crowdfunding until really like late 2017. Some unlisted public companies could, but they couldn't get their offers out until 2018, realistically. 2019 was the first full year of private companies being able to do offers. And a credit needs to go to Peter Towers and his business here for creating the scorecard, which looks at which deals have been funded and which deals haven't been funded, and a number of funders. And so the data that you can see on the right comes from ESS publications. So credit to Peter and his team. And, you know, as at the end of February, those 15 licensed intermediaries had helped raise $39 million from businesses and their crowds through the issue of equity. And equity might become, you know, a preferable source of finance for a lot of small to medium-sized enterprises who are probably your clients as accountants and advisors. And so the reason I've got this lemon up here is that old fable, if life gives you lemons, let's make lemonade. And I think that we are going to have a choice between, as the banks start retreating and need to be even further frugal with their investments, and as business owners are leveraged personally and with their property that might be going through decreased valuations, taking on further debt within the business might not be possible. And so businesses now need to be open-minded to bringing on equity. And there is opportunities in bringing on equity partner if that equity is coming from stakeholders, suppliers, customers, channels to market, advocates of your brand. If they are bringing not just money, but marketing and other benefits to the party beyond debt. But, you know, there will be businesses that aren't prepared to do equity crowdfunding and can't get debt, and opportunities will be missed. And it's important that advisors and trusted advisors of these small businesses are in the position that they can advise clients succinctly and with a degree of clarity about the pros and cons of both debt and equity in the times that we're moving into. So I don't want to pretend for a second that equity crowdfunding will solve every business's woes. There are some negatives, and it's important that we put them up front. So debt will be cheap at the moment. You know, we're almost going into negative interest rates. If you can secure it, you know, it might be a couple of percent, and for the foreseeable future, you know, there is a lot of debt awash in the economy that needs to find a good home. Whether you're a good home or not, as considered by those lenders, is yet to be seen. The other negative with equity crowdfunding is, as I'll explain later, you need a story. If you're going to get people who are retail mum and dad investors on board, you know, your story might be getting on the ground floor of the next Facebook and, you know, back a unicorn. But it's more likely going to be a story that resonates with that individual because they feel that they're co-creating something with your business and they're taking co-ownership of the business as a result of that co-creation work. And equity crowdfunding is hard work. I mean, a loan, whether you get it or not, is essentially, you know, your accountant preparing a lodgement and you lodging an application with the bank. It isn't rocket science, but it's important work. Equity crowdfunding, on the other hand, is hard work. So why would you then do something that's expensive, requires you to have a story, and requires hard work in its acquisition? Well, it does bring a heap of benefits. So the money, obviously, like if you need money to capitalize on the opportunity, that opportunity might be that your competitors are feeling the strain too. So there's acquisition opportunities. It might be that there is market share that can be captured at this point in time by offering significant value. And if you don't get that loan, equity, if you can't put it in as yourself as the founders and the owners or the advisors, tight circle around the founders and owners, that money is going to be really important. But also, like taking Jordan's point about mindset, you really need to have a rallying point to bring your business out of the shadows and concerns and personal doubts that the pandemic that we've been experiencing recently has no doubt had on a business owner's psyche. And by providing a rally point, this is what our story is. This is what we're going to do with our stakeholders. This is the market we're going to acquire. This is why we believe it. You give a focus to the underlying organization and the actors and stakeholders within your ecosystem. And that has benefits regardless of the money that you raise. Also, it's an interesting story when you're doing equity crowdfunding, and your publicity and PR ability to get in the news and talk to customers and talk to potential funders and talk to financiers is much improved. Your cost of customer acquisition and lifetime customer value. Okay, so CCA. Depending on the product that you've got, equity crowdfunding can be a really interesting model. So I want to use the alcohol brands as an example. So alcohol brands have, a particular business model where the lifetime ownership or the lifetime customer value of a beer brand is over a long time. That person could be drinking beer for the next 20, 40, 60 years. Okay. Large brands like the Carlton United Breweries, Lion Nathan of old, find it hard to grow their existing portfolio. What they want to do is acquire new brands. Okay, so cost of customer acquisition for them is hard, and lifetime customer value for a beer drinker is long. So if you're a beer drinker and you're one of the 1,000 people on a mailing list, the Carlton United Breweries, when looking at a craft brewer, might say, oh, wow, you've got 10,000 people on a mailing list. We reckon you're worth X. If you've got 10,000 people who are signed up as a rewards crowdfunding participant, so they've pre-purchased a case of beer from your brewery on its first run, well, then it knows that you've got X number of 1,000 or 100 loyal customers whose lifetime customer value is much greater than 1,000 people on an email list, because these people feel a sense of ownership and have tried the product, right? Now, if you've got 1,000 people or a couple of hundred people who literally own a share in that beer, how many years of drinking that beer will they do? The value of the 1,000 people on a mailing list, 1,000 people on a rewards crowdfunding campaign goes up, but 1,000 owners of that beer/brewery, well, they've rusted on fans, and they're a distribution network and marketing effect all of their own. When the Lion Nathan's CUBs buy equity crowdfunding businesses, the equity crowdfunding business is proving up the lifetime customer value proposition for the large brewer and achieving a higher multiple. and making that acquisition more certain. So equity crowdfunding can bring money to the table, provides a rallying point, improves the marketing of the underlying business, and depending on the nature of the business model, and we're seeing this with alcohol brands, it improves the options and valuations of exits. So this isn't hypothetical. Brewdogs did this in the UK, a Scottish craft brewery company that did 5 rounds of equity crowdfunding and ultimately sold out to Anwar Bausch for $1.6 billion. The people who participated in that equity crowdfunding raise had a 50x return. More close to home in equity crowdfunding, the 2018 record raise using equity crowdfunding was Food Connect. Food Connect is a food delivery, an ethical and fair food delivery box business run out of Brisbane. It commenced in the aftermath of the floods. And Robert Pekin and his wife, Emma Kate, had been running Food Connect, where they received deliveries of fresh fruit and vegetables from farmers that they paid a fair price to, and then they boxed those up and sent them out to concerned mum and dads in the surrounding Brisbane suburbs. They'd been operating from a warehouse just a few kilometres from the Brisbane CBD. An opportunity came up to buy the warehouse that they'd been leasing for the last 12 years. To buy that, they needed to raise money and they would need to have effective use of the increased space. So they would need to transition their business from just being a food box business to being an anchor kind of client to a fair food hub. And so they went into joint ventures with Harvest Oz, which is a fair food recovery business, a couple of craft brewers. They got together the money and to do the initial legal work. And then they raised $2.1 million from essentially their customers, the people who bought food boxes from them or on a weekly basis, to be able to move from renting their warehouse to buying their warehouse and scaling up their business and doing more joint ventures within their ecosystem. That's a great story, and it also has great maths behind it. Sheba, if you haven't come across them, they're like, women in today's day and age, particularly with the Me Too movement and sad state of affairs about their personal security, have concerns about Uber and rideshare businesses. Women also running businesses and having jobs whilst their children are finishing school and don't often have the ability to go from work to the school to drop a kid from after school to an after school activity like gymnastics or the pool. So Sheba was created in response to that, and it has only women drivers picking up only women and children. All the drivers have working with children protection and clearances. They're all got police checks. And this rideshare community enables a mum to get another woman to pick her child up and take her to gymnastics, all via the convenience of an app, very much like Uber. Only thing is, Sheba does this for its all-female community for like 15% flag fall, when Uber's 20 to 30% flag fall. What Sheba has been able to do is expand nationally in Australia, but it's got a cost of customer acquisition and a lifetime customer value proposition as well. And cost requires capital. And so where did it get its capital from? It did the largest equity crowdfunding raise in 2019 of 3.1 million, another million more than Food Connect managed to do. And most of its, 94% of its funders were women. Of that, 80% of them were their drivers. So their drivers now have a stake in keeping Sheba's quality of service up and being great brand advocates for that business. They were putting their own money into the business. Not only would that make sure the business was there and thriving, it also reduced their flag fall from 15% down to 10% for 6 months, if they took advantage of the equity crowdfunding raise. What a rallying point, what a marketing point, what a lot of PR they've achieved. But funding, as opposed to the crowd, is about compliance. The conflicted role of intermediaries is both, and these are platforms like Virtual or Equitize or Pledge Me or On Market. Their role as licensed intermediaries, ASIC went, well, this is a bit too hard to do under the normal Corporations Act. So we're going to give licenses to intermediaries. They're going to be simultaneously the promoter and the policeman for the issues that get put out to the market. So that in lay terms means the intermediaries like Virtual and Pledge Me, they're responsible for what the companies like Sheba and Food Connect put out as investments to their community. So they have a responsibility to make sure that everything is kosher with the investments. But that means that they, dot I's and cross T's. That is a goldmine opportunity for forward-thinking advisors and accountants to recognise the opportunity for equity crowdfunding for SMEs, the need for that story, the need also to be complemented with accounting skills, because equity crowdfunding is simultaneously a left brain and a right brain activity. You need to have the numbers. If you can't make a compelling investment case, you're not going to get investors. Like if Sheba couldn't convince their drivers of the value of Sheba commercially, it wouldn't matter how good their story is. But when the numbers add up and the story adds up, the potential for, synergy, co-benefits is massively improved. So, I'd invite you to get in touch if you want. Peter is a fantastic resource, of course. ESS BIZTOOls has been doing the scorecard since equity crowdfunding legislation came out. And that has been a wonderful resource for the whole equity crowdfunding community. And I credit Peter for all his hard work. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. It's been an interesting story, hasn't it? You got any predictions as what's going to happen after October? Do you think we're going to have a lot more companies coming forward to raise crowdsource funding?
Yeah, I think the fundamentals are there, and that debt will be harder to get. Businesses with communities that want to see those businesses not just survive, but thrive, have a real opportunity. And I think we have a really savvy business class. The value of story is becoming more important to people. And what you're doing, educating the advisory class about the equity option, I think the fundamentals are, the businesses will need to turn to equity crowdfunding. They need to turn to their stakeholders. So yeah, I do predict it's going to get more popular. Caveat, I've been speaking with, most of the platforms in Australia in the last few weeks, and all of them have got a decrease in listings, and some of the listings have been less completed than maybe originally thought. So there were higher hopes for a fashion company than were achieved. But there's a pipeline of really good, interesting deals in there. And I think on balance, we'll probably see this fear carry on for, up to a quarter, whilst the JobKeeper, JobSeeker, JobMaker kind of new environment is sorted out. And then from the end of the year through 2021, I actually expect quite a lot of businesses relative to what have gone through now, but quite a lot, as in millions, will be raised using equity crowdfunding.
Well, that's good news. Today we're talking to accountants and business advisors and some bookkeepers. I think it's a valid role for accountants and business advisors to be openly advising their clients on this journey, because after all, these companies are going to need budgets, business plans, cash flow forecasts, an understanding of corporate governance, an understanding of how this process works, because it is different. And you said that earlier. That's the investment that has to be made to achieve the knowledge. But do you agree it's a worthwhile activity for accountancy firms, a lot of which are sitting around now, really starting to plan what they're going to do in 2020, 21?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's not only, I think it's very prudent, right? Like, imagine you don't understand a bank product. That would be considered almost negligent. Here is an equity product, which I think accountants need to be aware of. If you're going to be a trusted advisor and useful to your clients, I mean, that's, as I said, I'm not an accountant, not a lawyer, and this isn't advice. That's an opinion.
Yeah, and I think the thing to point out too, and obviously most accountants understand this, that you don't have to have every partner in a firm that you're accredited crowdsource funding expert or a manager. That person might be. But I think it would be desirable that within a firm there is a champion for crowdsource funding equity raising and early stage innovation companies, because that's the brother or the sister product really, but we tend to forget about at times. So have you seen much activity in that early stage innovation companies?
Early stage innovation companies, definitely. In addition, you know, accountants and their advisors are usually part of the core team with the CEO/founders.
Yeah.
And I think it's incumbent on them to bring the numbers, but they also need to know what needs to be done with the numbers is match them to a story. And it's almost kind of, you know, that you need to be part of that team for them not to screw it up. And there's billable hours in that, right? So there's less billable hours in, you know, applying for a loan on their behalf. There's less billable hours in just preparing tax returns. If you want billable hours and you want your clients to be seeing you as a trusted advisor because you understand equity and debt, and if you want those, in some cases, businesses to be able to take advantages of those opportunities or even be there, then the billable hours they invest in you are completely worthwhile. So that's, yeah, like if I was an accountant, I can't understand why you wouldn't want to be fluent in equity crowdfunding if your clientele is small and medium-sized businesses.
Yep. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Andrew. I haven't got any questions yet, but obviously we're asking the viewers and the people that watch this recording later on to send us through their questions if they like. So we just might move on now. So thank you very much. It was great to hear from you. I now want to give you the update for this week on COVID-19 news update. Now, I know we've talked about JobKeeper registrations in the last couple of weeks, but the 31st of May, which is only a couple of days away, is a very important date, because if you want to be able to claim your payments of wages from April onwards, you need to be registered with the tax office so that you are able to claim the $1,500 per fortnight per employee. So the apprentice trainee subsidy registrations are now open, but you cannot claim the apprentice on JobKeeper if you're getting the apprenticeship subsidy. There obviously will be some situations where the apprentice trainee subsidy is beneficial. You can claim up to $21,000 over a 9-month period. That's calculated at 50% of the apprentice's salary for that 9-month period. You need to register now via the tax office. Just a reminder, because from emails that I've seen and comments that I'm seeing on the internet and in some of the magazine or news articles, there seems to be some confusion on the Commercial Tenancy Code of Conduct. You have to have qualified as JobKeeper eligible. So in other words, the business has to be with a turnover of under $50 million. You don't have to go through and actually start receiving the wage supplement of $1,500 per fortnight, but you have to qualify if you are going to utilize the Commercial Tenancy Code of Conduct. I noticed today the Queensland government has finally passed the legislation. I don't know why it's taken so long. Must be nearly 4 weeks since the Prime Minister announced the Commercial Tenancy Code of Conduct. As far as I now know, every state and territory in Australia has introduced this legislation so that businesses can use it in negotiations with your landlords relative to rent variations or rental deferrals. The tax office announced, I think earlier this week, that the lodgement date for the monthly declarations can now be made by the 14th day of the following month. So the declarations for May have to be made by the 14th of June. Originally, that was going to be the 7th day, but the accountancy profession made representations to the tax office about that, and it has now been set that it will be the 14th day of each month. You will need to coordinate with your clients, of course, about that. And this is one of my pet subjects. The Reserve Bank and the federal government introduced the coronavirus SME guarantee loans. The Reserve Bank stipulation, when they told the banks that there was $105 billion available for this, was that any unallocated funding into the loan categories had to be returned to the Reserve Bank by the 30th of September. So that avenue of borrowing is not going to be there by 1 October. Therefore, if you're preparing your budgets and your cash flow forecasts now, which I would urge you to be doing so for your clients, and you're showing that there's going to be some cash requirements later in the year or even into 2021, I'd be exploring the opportunity of trying to enter into one of these loans now, the coronavirus SME guarantee loans. The maximum's $250,000. The term is 3 years. There is no security requirements. The federal government's guaranteeing 50% of the debt. I do hear that some of the banks are asking for personal guarantees, but they're good loans that you might be able to encourage your client to seek now. But to gain that loan, you're going to need a budget, a cash flow forecast, business plan, maybe a dot point business plan, obviously financials for last year, interim financials to the end of March. So it's a normal application because the Reserve Bank's stipulation to the banks was that they were to utilize their normal lending criteria. But just a reminder, those loans are only available to the 30th of September. I've got grave doubts what's going to be available for SMEs from 1 October onwards from the banking system. You can still continue to review your clients to see if someone that hasn't qualified in March, April, or the 3 months, April, May, June, might subsequently qualify for JobKeeper because their turnover is reduced by 30% in one of those months, and then you can register them. So obviously in your internal systems, monitoring your clients, I'd be suggesting that you need to keep some of your clients under close scrutiny to see whether they're going to qualify, and then of course asking them whether they wish to proceed with a JobKeeper application. If you've got any questions about any of that, please ask me in a moment. You can log into the Q&A or chat, and we will look at that shortly. Now, I'll come back to that because that's talking about the presentations that we've already seen, and we're going to do that in a moment. The ESS BizTools can assist accountants. We've developed business improvement tools that you can utilize to deliver a wider range of services. One of them is the COVID-19 coronavirus product package, which is available. And we also have survival in difficult times product package. This is looking at helping businesses that were confronted by the natural disasters that we had in 2019, in the beginning of 2020. Yes, do you remember those? They were our big problem area, weren't they? Right through to the middle of February. And suddenly it started dawning on us there was something else emerging from a country overseas. And we had incorporated all that within the survival in difficult times product package. We have 23 other product packages covering a whole range of matters: Chief Financial Officer services, personal property securities register, preparation of business plans, corporate governance, and the list goes on. All of the duties that we believe accountants who are fair income about running a wider range of professional services to assist your clients to grow will find beneficial to use in your accountancy firms. So please go onto our website, www.essbiztools.com.au, to have a look. Next week, we have our next COVID-19 survival panel at 12 noon on the 5th of June. Our keynote presenters are Mark Holton, an accountant, coach, and mentor. Mark is going to use his considerable experience dealing with accountants all over Australia to give his overview of the services that he thinks accountants should be providing in the aftermath of this coronavirus. And I'll be making a presentation on research and development because, number one, I think there might have been some of your clients sitting at home during this work from home period that might have been doing some calculations, doing some fiddling in their sheds or on their computers, perhaps developing some new products that they could go and talk to the crowdsource funding intermediaries about, ultimately about trying to raise capital under crowdsource funding. So we're going to do a presentation on research and development. We do have a product package within ESS BizTools on research and development. And this is the way we think you should go about setting up a system for your clients to make sure that the whole process is done, because it is a journey and it has to be done properly if you're going to satisfy the requirements of the tax office. Ultimately, you will be signing the tax return for research and development, and you need to know the system's been set up properly. But prior to that, I think you need to make sure that you are alerting your clients that you are interested in joining them on this journey to help identify research and development, document it so that they can receive the research and development rebate. So you can register for next week's webinar by going to essbiztools.com.au/webinars. And I'm just going to check if there's any more questions come in. I did have a note, but I seem to have lost it, that someone had sent through, being very complimentary on both the presentations. So thank you very much to Jordan and Andrew. So Andrew, thank you for joining us today. I hope you have the opportunity to join us at another of these webinars later in the year.
Thanks, Peter. It was great to be here.
Thank you. Jordan, are you still with us, or do you have to go back to the office?
No, I'm here, mate, in the mobile office still. So
okay.
Great presentation, Andrew. And no, thank you very much for having me, Peter. It was
Yeah,
great.
thank you, Jordan. It was great. And we have had a couple of nice comments. Mark, they weren't actually questions. They were just thanking you and Andrew for your presentations today. And on behalf of the ESS BizTools team, I would really like to thank both of you for your contribution.
Thanks very much, Peter.
So for more information, you can visit ESS BizTools website, Survival in Difficult Times, Learn More. And on that website, we also have information on the presentations that we've made over the last 6 weeks. This is episode 7 in this series. You can go back and watch the recordings from the previous presentations, and you can look at the profiles and the photographs of the people who are affiliates in this presentation series by ESS BizTools. So finally, please stay safe. Thank you for participating with us today. Good luck in your firm. If you have any questions, please ask us. It's only an email, so send us an email. And if you want to talk to Jordan or Andrew, I will put you in touch with them, and you can talk to them about any matters that you think might affect your accountancy firm and how it's going to run in the future. So have a great day. Thank you for being with us today. Goodbye. Goodbye, Jordan. Goodbye, Andrew.
Bye, Peter. Thank you, mate.
Thank
It was
you.
a pleasure. Cheers, gentlemen.
Thank you.